last years of the 19th century, that human affairs were being watched from the timeless worlds of space. No one could have dreamed we were being scrutinized as someone with a microscope studies creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. Few men even considered the possibility of life on other planets. And yet, across the gulf of space, minds immeasurably superior to ours regarded this Earth with envious eyes. And slowly and surely, they drew their plans against us.
Broadcasting live
from a tiny studio somewhere in North America.
This is Dark Matters Radio Live. And now I give you your host,
the silverback of ufology.
Here's Don Ecker.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another edition of Dark Matters Radio. And boy, we have a very heavy show tonight. Heavy in the sense that it's solemn, and I hope you will take the time to do some reflection in the next 2 hours. Now, before I introduce tonight's guest, and it was a gentleman I just met this week, although I did know who he was. And I got to tell you, I have a very high regard for this man. And I think what he has to say tonight will certainly and definitely give you some reason to consider a number of things. I got to say this, and it's going to figure in to the overall theme of tonight's program. It was 19 years ago today, September the 11th, 2001. I was sound asleep in bed. It was actually rather late for me. It was about 7:30 in the morning. Generally, I'm up between 5:30 and 6. But for whatever reason that morning, I was sleeping in a little bit, and the phone rang. And I kind of clawed my way out of sleep, and I picked up the phone, and I said, hello. And it was my buddy, movie actor and television actor, Dwight Schultz. You probably know him from the A-Team or even Star Trek. And to say he was excited, I would have guessed he was bouncing off the roof. And he said, my God, did you see it? Did you see it? And I did not have a clue what he was talking about. He said, my God, Don, go out and turn on the TV. So now I get a little anxiety ridden. So I went out and I turned on the television, and I saw those horrific scenes coming out of New York City. I couldn't believe my eyes. Now, that day, my wife, Vicki, and I spent glued to the television to see what was going to happen next. We live north of Los Angeles, and there was a lot of chatter going around that perhaps Los Angeles was also a target. And they were trying to get every aircraft flying in the skies to land so they could take stock of exactly what in the world was happening. Remember, there were 4 aircraft, 4 that had been hijacked, 4 that we knew of at the time. The 2 that hit the Twin Towers, 1 that hit the Pentagon, and 1 that was brought down near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, actually my home state of Pennsylvania. Well, to say the next few weeks were chaotic would be an understatement. And the people that did this were, by all accounts, apparently religious fanatics, barbarians, and savages. And I got to tell you, at the time, I was kind of like that retired fire station dog. I heard the bells clanging, and by God, I wanted to go. Well, I had gone before, of course. I had gone into the armed forces in 1969 in the United States Army. I took a lot of advanced training. I was deployed over to Southeast Asia, and I did my thing over there until I got wounded. And I got to tell you, once you're in a situation like that, it never quite ever leaves you. And it took me years, at least 10 or more, before I was back to a semblance of what I had been before. And incidentally, we're going to be talking about that tonight. But it was then just a short 11 years from that date in 2001 until 2012, and it happened again, only it didn't happen here. It happened in Libya. And during that debacle, and by God, that's exactly what it was, a debacle, we had personnel over there. We had security staff over there. We had an ambassador over there that were attacked by religious fanatics and barbarians and savages. The ambassador was murdered. Continuous and constant cries for assistance were directed back to Washington, D.C., which were deliberately ignored by the president, the Secretary of State, and the UN ambassador. Now, my guest, when I introduce him tonight, is going to tell you from his military service and from mine that we in the armed forces have one axiom that we try to live up to if it is humanly possible, and sometimes even beyond. And that is to leave no man, and today, no woman behind. And that's exactly, by God, what Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Rice did. And it was only by the grace of God that any of those people got out of there. And you know how they got out of there? Because they had a few men and women with some guts and M16 rifles that were willing to stand up and beat those hordes of barbaric savages back. And if that offends somebody, or anybody for that matter, well, I can only say tough shit. I get very, very emotional when I think about that, because unless you have been in a situation where you are, for all intents and purposes, sure you're not going to get out of there alive, well, that's really about the only way you can understand that. Now, with all of that being said, my guest tonight is Colonel Michael Brown, retired from the United States Army. Colonel Brown spent 31 years serving this country. He commanded at the Brigade, Battalion, and Company levels. He served in Bosnia, Kosovo, Kuwait, Qatar, Iraq, and Afghanistan. He started out his military career as an enlisted personnel, made it up to sergeant. He got out, went back to college, finished an ROTC degree, and he was commissioned a second lieutenant. Well, he went from second lieutenant all the way up to colonel. He holds 2 master's degrees and is a graduate of the United States Army War College, a very prestigious institution. Now, you may be wondering, did we just bring Colonel Brown on to talk about 9/11? Absolutely not. Colonel Brown is joining the KGRA family as one of our newest broadcasters. He is going to be doing and is doing a show called Crisis in America, PTSD and Veterans Suicide. He has been working with military veterans, many of them, as a result of the 9/11 attacks, guys that and women that were in the armed forces, all of them, the United States Army, United States Marine Corps, United States Air Force, United States Navy. And these people had been, many of them, continuously rotated in and out and in and out. Remember, this war that we're incidentally still in has been the longest conflict in American history. We used to say Vietnam was that war that went from 1961 until 1975. Well, no longer. Now it's this current war fighting Islamic terrorism. And with that being said, Colonel Mike Brown, it is a distinct pleasure having you on the show. Welcome home, by the way, brother. And how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing fine, Don. Thank you very much. I do appreciate everything you said today. That was very humbling. And your opening comments were straight on. It truly is remarkable where this country has come from, where it is today. And surely who knows where we're going to go. But one thing for sure is we're never going to leave anybody behind, like you said. And thank you for introducing our new show, Crisis in America, PTSD and Veteran Suicide. I am now a proud member of a great family there at KGRA with Bill Forte and crew, and including yourself. So I'm going to learn a lot of pointers from you, Bill.
Well, your program, Mike, from what I understand, will be airing Sundays at 5 p.m. Eastern. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Bill. We started out. I'm sorry, sitting there. Sorry, Bill. I'm sorry, Don. Yeah, Bill brought us in on Sundays at 5 to 6, and that's going to air each Sunday, and then repeat it throughout the week. So, but our prime time there is on Sundays at 5 to 6 Eastern Standard Time. So we're getting a lot of good press right now. Love the listening base. Love the comments that we're getting out of there. And we used to start there, Don, back down in our own backyards. We started this thing, just me and Sean Flynn and Deborah, on our own. And Bill called Deborah up and asked if we wanted to come on KGRA. And as important as this topic is to me, Don, I didn't step back at that chance. I've always been told once you grab an opportunity or it grabs you, you take it. And that's exactly what we did, with the co-occurrence of PTSD and this moral injury, these invisible wounds of war that we're so much suffering right now. We needed a bigger audience.
Well,
this is a big issue.
I would think, Mike, that many of the people that you would be working with would have that PTSD situation compounded by constant returns to the combat zone, to the AO of operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and so forth. Now, those people were not that. We certainly had, in Vietnam, had problems with booby traps and mines, but the IEDs, the improvised explosive devices that were deployed against our forces, were especially egregious. I know of, having been the former commander of the Audie Murphy chapter of the Military Order of the Purple Heart out here in Los Angeles, I knew many fellows and girls, women, that returned wounded, many of them being wounded by IEDs. And anybody that's ever served in a combat zone will tell you that is something that just it frustrates you, because you have brothers and now sisters being wounded by these damned things. And at least in a firefight, you get a chance to give some back. But those are anonymous. They truly are to whom it may concern, aren't they?
Yeah, war is hell. You know, that's what General William Tecumseh Sherman famously stated during the Civil War. You know, it's hell for the non-combatants as well. And that's kind of what you're talking about in this era that we fought our wars in. You guys called it shell shock, you know, Vietnam veterans disorder. But the wars that we are in, and this is a great point you bring up, and this is the great discriminator, because you'll get some folks out there, well, what's the difference between PTSD amongst the civilian population or those from prior wars? What's so different about this war? Well, you brought point one up. We are in the longest war in the history, and the average deployments per person, per soldier, airman, Marines, sailor, Coast Guardman, whatever, it is 3. That's the average. And some are up into the 6s and 7s. Myself is 5. And you talk about special forces and your Delta forces, you're talking up around a dozen to 15. And that repetitiveness environment of not just IED explosions, you have, especially in Iraq, I can tell you stories where the meaning of life is totally different. There were families, the fathers would throw their children out in front of vehicles and have them run over. You would have the impacts of high-value targets would be in a village, and our precision missiles, even though they're precise, they would still increase heavily damage and kill innocent women and children. And you can't get away from that in a war. That's why war's hell. It's the last option you want. But when you're fighting that urban village type of terrain, it is torrential. And we all have heard about Fallujah. But what about the executions and then the aftermath of the executions that our folks had to go into, the body bags that they had to go into, the crash sites that they had to go to and put smoked out bodies into? You know, their battle buddies getting taken out right next to them, and then they're living. The guilt, the shame that's associated with that. What about the accidental deaths that occur? I wrote stories about this. I've went out into America a couple of years ago and started talking about families of the fallen and witnessing some of these incidents where, you know, they are guilt-ridden because what they were asked to do broke their moral code, but they had to do it. So when they get home, to your point, and the fanfare is over with, the accolades are over with, and they get back into their family settings, here's where their moral codes start coming back alive. And here's where their spirituality starts coming back. And here's where the haunting begins.
Well,
this makes the difference.
This particular epoch, Mike, in my opinion, this is my opinion, all right? You can tell me if you agree or disagree. This is a very unusual time. Now, in 1972, Richard Nixon, who was still then president of the United States, did away with the draft. Now, I had been an enlistee. I enlisted. I was not drafted. A lot of guys were, but I said, okay, yeah, it's my time. I'm going to do it. And I went in. I did it. But I had a sinking, sneaking suspicion then that the whole draft thing would end up biting us in the butt. Now, what am I getting at? Well, it's very simple. Today, the only people that serve are those who ask to serve, which means that the vast majority of people today in this nation do not have any skin in the game. And what that means is that cities like Portland and Seattle and Chicago and these other places, Kenosha, can burn because the majority of people there have never stood up at attention when the flag is raised. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
Oh, yes. I totally agree. They have not understood, nor do they understood, the price of freedom. I mean, I'm just going to get right to the skin. The price of freedom, the blood that's been shed for us, the blood that's been shed so they can allow their protest to take place. They don't have a comprehension of what the last 19 years even took, just in the short term, to allow them to have what they have today. How soon they forgot what happened in 9/11. How soon their world was trampled on and their freedoms was infringed on. And those that had to go out and to defend our homeland, which was the worst attack ever on America's soil. Over 3,000, nearly 3,000 deaths. And an economy collapse and freedoms infringed. Nor do they understand the traumas and the pain and the suffering of the families and the sons and daughters of this great nation who are now suffering with over 6,200 deaths per year of suicide, over 68,000 who have died already just in the Iraqi-Afghani war period. That's one every 65 minutes dying for those bastards. You know, the mortality rate just from the Iraqi and Afghani war for a suicide mortality rate is 8%. We dug into the numbers. You don't hear the VA, the DOD express those numbers because they're afraid. We're not afraid. That's what it is. About.
Over 6,000 per year.
6,000 per year, and that's only talking from 2008 to 2019. We're going to peak over 72,000 this year in 2020, and I bet you a cup of coffee that's going to rise because of the COVID-19, and we can get onto that later on in the show. Here's what's scarier about it. That mortality rate I'm talking about, because you got to put this in the figures of the congressmen, the politicians, and the American public, because they can understand mortality rates. It's 8%. The COVID-19 virus is only 2%. So if you normalize the population, this is 4 times more deadly than the COVID-19 virus if you normalize the population amongst those that are sick and suffering. That's how bad it is, and it's supposed to peak to 9%. That's 800,000 right now that are suffering from PTSD, moral injury, and illnesses of the mind.
Well, let me ask you a question, because when I was the commander of the Audie Murphy chapter of MOPH, I went to the VA. I've been a VA patient literally since I came back. When I got out in 72, about a month and a half later, I had some very, very serious problems that popped up from shrapnel that I still had in me, and I had to go back into the hospital. And I went into a VA hospital, which luckily my hometown had one. And so I dealt with the VA since I got out of the service. And we went, my officers and I went to the VA trying to get a list of guys and women coming back from overseas that had been wounded, because there was a lot of things we could do for them from our Veterans Service Organization. And they would give us no information whatsoever. Now, why do I mention this? I wanted to find out how you are able to make connections with these people, because I sincerely doubt, Mike, that the VA has been working with you hand in hand on this. Have they?
Don, this is a great question. I'm going to let you know these institutions, the VA is what I'm talking about, and there's others, but the VA is the one who's supposed to care for our wounded and our dead and their families and the children who are even unborn yet. That's their motto. That came from Lincoln in his second inaugural address in 1865. Most people remember that famous quote, "Malice towards none." That was embedded. That's the VA's motto. It came after Lincoln. So you would think there'd be transparency within this organization. There's not. So my team, our team, in our show is few, but we are dedicated in our research, and we have to do our own research and go through our own channels. And we have some folks on the inside that provide us some really good data. And our research, I would say, is sole source, meaning it goes right to the heart of the source. It's not secondhand or third hand. This is all credible data that comes out that we have, and we have it, and we can show it to anybody who wants to debate it. And we will. And we've told people on the show that we will. So to get this kind of information, you have to do in-depth research. We've come up with a model of our own for analysis by drawing numbers from other statistical status and studies that have been done from outside organizations, from VA studies, and have pulled all that data together and come up with these figures.
Okay, Mike, hold that thought right there, because we're going to take our first break. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, my guest, Colonel Michael Brown, retired from the United States Army, who has a new program on KGRA. The program is Crisis in America, Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder, and Veteran Suicide, because the guys and women we've been sending overseas continuously for the last almost 2 decades, well, it's wearing on them. We got a lot more coming up. Stick around.
I'm getting older and noticing that my body just doesn't work as well as it used to. So I like to keep fit as possible by hitting the gym a few times a week. Recently, I started having a nagging bicep pain, and it got so bad I couldn't even lift the weights. When I was complaining about it to a friend, he told me about Angioprim. He said chelation helps remove toxins, heavy metals, and cholesterol in veins and arteries that may cause blockages. You know, after just 1 week of taking Angioprim, the pain was gone, and now I'm back in the gym full strength. Scientific research proves the active ingredient in Angioprim has superior oral chelation action that helps promote cardiovascular health. So to learn more, go to angioprim.com. That's ANGIOPRIM.com, or talk to a trained consultant. Call Angioprim toll free at 945-882-7221. You'll feel better with more energy. That's 945-882-7221. Or go to the website angioprim.com.
Folks, this is very important information. What's to be said about CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. Our CBD is made from hemp and has 0.003 THC, which means this wonderful product won't get you high, no matter what amount you take. What does CBD do for the body? My hands are tied. But you can Google CBD benefits and be astounded. When you're finished reading, you'll want to log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com and purchase. Life is good when you feel good. People are tired of pain. People are asking for non-GMO organic products to help them with You fill in the blank. Legal in 49 states, and again, our CBD is made from hemp. Ancient Life Oil is about helping people one by one by one. If you wonder how good the product is, the CEO takes it every day without miss. AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Have a great day.
The Liberator Rocket Heater will heat your home for free. The highly efficient Liberator Rocket Heater has no moving parts. It's safe and strong, constructed of quarter-inch steel. So like all things made in the USA, it's built to last. Uses any kind of wood, sticks, even scrap in its gravity-fed firebox. And it heats workshops, homes, garages, outbuildings, industrial areas, and barns. Watch the video of this blast furnace stove in action. Visit RocketHeater.com. That's RocketHeater.com.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app. Free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Mainstream media's most wanted. KGRARadio.com.
And we are back with my guest this evening, Colonel Michael Brown. Mike, it's been a real pleasure getting you on this week. Now, right before we had to go to break, we were discussing the Veterans Administration. Now, I can give you some of my own stories about the VA, but you were just starting to get on a roll, and I certainly did not want to get in the way of that. So why don't you pick it up where you left off?
So the VA, again, is supposed to be the caretakers of our veterans and their families. No doubt. That's in their charter. So I want to start out while we're hitting hard on the suicidal piece of it and why the VA is failing. And I'm going to give you a statement, and this came out of reliable sources and data, and I can prove it. If anybody wants to challenge me, you can get a hold of me at brown.mike734@gmail.com, and along with my producer, Deborah East, and Sean Flynn is our other co-host, and Rick Brown's our researcher. The Veteran Administration has a higher rate of suicides for those in their care than the normal public, where veterans are seeking help outside.
What do you attribute that to?
I attribute that to lack of quality care. I attribute that to incompetency. The Department of Veterans Affairs is inept, it's bloated, and it's incapable of properly organizing itself. And it's proven it's the wrong institution to deliver these much-needed services. It fails, it's got scandals, and I believe, Don, it's a great question. I don't think it can be trusted anymore to serve our Americans in the armed forces within the mental health. And we've been waiting too long. We've been waiting too long for them to reduce the suicide rate of 22 a day. It's been going on since 2008, and not one decrease has happened. And this newest statement I just made was released not more than 3 weeks ago. And that was that was an analytical status. That was a model status that came out. That was not a word or an opinion. It was a factual model that came out. One of the things, Mike, that our current President Trump was attempting to do was to do a revamp with the VA, with VA care for our warriors. I'm gonna, in a second here, I'm gonna go into a personal story that happened to me. But what I wanted to ask you, what is your feeling about what the president has tried to do in regards to the Veterans Administration? So let's look at the political side. This is not a top-down driven solution, period. This is a ground-up local solution. What the president has done, and you're talking about prevents, the presidential roadmap to lower suicides in our nation. What he has done is put Wilkie, as the Secretary of Veterans Administration, in charge. And he's touting that this is the priority number one. And I'm not criticizing President Trump. I believe everybody has, especially the president, has cabinet members he's entrusted to execute his missions. And this Mr. Wilkie, the secretary, has failed him. Period.
How so?
Priority, he's failed him because he has not been able to put quality care. This is the next thing he hasn't been able to do. He has not. There's 600. I told you that number earlier. 800,000 veterans right now. Veterans. People have fought this war for us. They went to war. There's 650,000 of those veterans are not able to get health care in Wilkie's Veterans Administration. You ask me why? You have to ask that to Dr. Wilkie. I'll tell you why. Because he has a inept, bloated facility that is incompetent of processing claims forms. Won't let them in. And I tell you what they did before. Here's what they did recently. They used to use the VFW and the American Legion to help them process these claim forms. You know what that son of a bitch did back in April? He signed his own order and told the VFW, you're no longer needed to help us process claims forms. Now you ask me what President Trump tried to do with prevent. He's been trying to ask for nonprofits and veteran service organizations to help out the VA so they can get claims forms, get access to health care.
Why in the hell would they tell the VFW that they're not needed for?
You tell me, because this is what they said. They said, we don't need you. Well, you do need them. You're still backlogged in claims.
Well, I'm surprised the Disabled American Veterans, the DAV, was not involved in that.
They weren't involved, so they're a VSO. They're not involved. The VFW wasn't involved, and the American Legion. And you know what their undersecretary said in a written statement in May of this year? I don't care what the VSO says. We're going along with this policy. So now what the VFW has done has wrote a legislation to the president, which is getting through the Senate right now, to write a law that mandates VSOs. Now, how much bullshit is that? You have a cabinet member, Wilkie, who works for the president, that says he's not going to abide by the President's Prevents Act to allow these service organizations to help out. Now you have a service organization writing a law, legislation for a law, so the president can tell Wilkie that works for him, now you have a law, you have to listen to me. You see what I'm saying? Makes no sense.
Right.
That's what's going on behind the scenes. And, oh, by the way, access to care is the number one killer for suicides.
Well, I'll tell you, since the beginning of the year, the beginning of this year, I am supposed to see my primary care physician every 4 to 6 months. The last time I saw
how's that working for you? Yeah, how's
anybody was sometime in latter 2019. Now, the COVID-19 thing, I'm sure, had quite a bit to do with it. But I told you I was going to have a story. This is actually a rather short story. But where I live in California, in Southern California, I used to go from where I'm at in the San Fernando Valley down to West Wilshire, where the Veterans Administration has a huge hospital facility down there. But it was a hell of a jaunt going to and from. So there was another VA facility much closer to me that I can actually get to in about 20 minutes. So I've been going there now for years. I had my files and everything moved up to this other site. Now, for a while, everything was going fine. And then suddenly, I basically stopped hearing from them. Now, Mike, I'm 100% combat disabled. Okay? Yep. I am 100% disabled, combat disabled, according to the VA rules and regs. Now, I'm also, okay, I have prescribed meds that I have to take on a daily basis. Now, normally, what I do is I can phone in and get my scripts refilled. They'll send them to me, or I can go and pick them up. But back about 3 years ago, for the third time, I stopped hearing from them. So one day I was practically out of all my meds. I dropped everything and drove over, went in, and I go to they have the primary care physicians broken up in teams. I went to my team. The whole section was shut down. They were on a training thing, okay? There was nobody there to talk to. So I ended up going to another team that was open. And I saw a doctor. I told her my problem. She was able to call down to the pharmacy, get me a week's worth of meds, and she said she would have my doctor get in touch with me within a couple of days. Well, it never happened. So I'm trying to call him directly, and I go through their recorded telephone hell, okay? Finally, I said, that's it. I've had it. So what can I do? I guess I could go over there and jump up and down and yell, but that wouldn't be productive. You got to come up with a better plan, Don. So I called my U.S. congressman. I called his office, told the veterans representative what my problem was, and Mike, within 5 minutes, the VA was calling me.
Yeah, I agree. And it shouldn't have to be like that.
No, it shouldn't, but that finally got me action.
And so I agree with you. And what we're telling people on our show is the same thing. If you're not getting what you need right now, no matter what, even with the suicide understandings, you have to reach out to your congressmen and your senators. That's the only way things are getting done right now. So you're doing exactly what we're advising the American citizens, the families, the caregivers, and the veterans that are out there today. It's the only way to move it. And let me tell you while we're on the subject, the Department of Veterans Administration does not have a friendly relationship with Congress. It's a true statement. The last example I gave you by
who does have a good relationship with Congress?
I know, but in essence, there is laws. And there was a facility back in June. There was 5 facilities. I'll give you an example. So the president had sent a task force out of 5 congressmen to go visit 5 different facilities unannounced to get a comprehension of what was going on in the VA. 5 random ones. They showed up, and in their final analysis was all 5 were non-cooperative. The directors wouldn't let them in, and that's the relationship you have. So if President Trump is trying to say he's working, I believe his intent, he wants to work. I believe Wilkie has created such a toxic environment and is sending all these, if you see it today, you can just look at any paper, Who prints the press releases for the VA? The VA. Who does the news releases? The VA. And they're bountiful. But he plays a tremendous role in saying he's improving care for veterans in his last 2 years. But they're false. They're false narratives. The suicide rates have rose under his chaotic VA failed leadership. I want to tell you a story, and I wanted the American people here listen to your show, hear the tragedy of this. 341 suicides inside the VA. Have you heard about the suicides in the parking lots?
No.
There's been a rampant existence of frustrated mental health patients trying to get help at VAs, and they're killing themselves on the property. This story I'm getting ready to tell you is of a young man just recently within the last month or two, killed himself while he was inside of a VA property. His wife was frustrated. He was depressed, and she got him to go into the VA facility. They put him on a high-risk flag, red flag. What's a red flag mean? It means you're on 24-hour, 7 days guarded. Every 15 minutes you're watched. You have cameras on you. You are basically supervised. In the civilian world, you usually got a police officer sitting at the end of your bed. Unfortunately, this facility didn't have that, nor did they have a proper amount of nurses. And in fact, since they kind of understood that they didn't have working cameras for the last 3 years, they dropped him from a red flag to a normal.
Okay, I got a question. My detective raised its head. My detective in me. Was this guy a combat vet?
He was a combat vet from Afghanistan.
Army, Marines, what?
Army guy. Yep, an Army guy. PTSD. He had the whole shooting match.
Now, if he was red flag, that meant that he was regarded as a danger to himself or others. Were there any domestic problems, domestic abuse?
No domestic abuse, no criminal record, just suicidal. He had attempted suicide twice before. Recently, within the last 4 months, he had 2 suicide attempts. One was like March 11th, I remember the report right. And then 2 weeks later, he tried it again. So where
was this at? What part of the country?
Down in Florida. This was down in Florida. Yep. And he had 3 children. So he's a family man. His wife actually worked at the VA facility. She was a pharmacist. And he ended up hanging himself. Now, how do you, in a mental lockdown ward, first of all, how do you get out of sight? One thing. And how do you find the means to hang yourself? Second thing.
Well, how did Jeffrey Epstein hang himself? I mean, somebody fell down on the damn job.
Yeah, so that's right. It probably was a rhetorical question, but it was. Then they went in and inspected it, and then they found all these errors. And, oh, by the way, when the IG inspected the facility, the leadership kind of blew them off and tried to get malfeasance and try to get away with. They were unaccountable for it. And no one was ever charged. No one was ever disciplined. The workers still continue to work there. And now the family is actually, going through a lawsuit. And, oh, by the way, lawsuits amongst the VA for malpractice, over $1 billion of claims already filed and settled within the last 10 years.
Wow.
That's the kind of activity going on in our VA.
Now,
by the way, the VA gets $220 billion a year to do operations.
What are you personally and your other co-host, Sean Flynn, and your producer, Deborah, what are you folks able to do? Have you gotten involved, or do you have the wherewithal to get involved to be advocates for these people?
So we are so new. You know, we started off just being advocates for the mental health and suicide awareness. Both Sean and I suffer from PTSD.
Sean's a combat vet too?
He's a police officer. He's a police officer, or a former police officer, sheriff, I should say, down from Dade County, down in Florida. And we met at a PTSD facility down in Texas. And so we both wanted to do something that was good for society. Sean started this program back in March. And about April, he called me up and says, I need the veteran side. I'm the police guy. You're the vet side. Let's do this together. And we kind of blossomed out of that. So now we started up a foundation, which we just started up a couple weeks ago, called Spiritual Warrior Foundation. So we're actually doing groundbreaking cement mortar right now, just kind of trying to figure out where we want to take this.
Where is Sean now, Mike?
He's out of Florida.
Florida, okay.
So Sean's out of Florida. Deborah's out of the state of Washington. And our Rick Brown, he's out of Columbus, Ohio. So what we're trying to advocate for and trying to get our hands around is that we want to open all VA mental health facilities right now. They're all closed other than telehealth, but telehealth is a Band-Aid. You know, most of our veterans live in rural communities outside of where broadband is able to connect. They're homeless, or they just don't have IT capability. So it's not really good to have mental health when you don't have IT capability. We're looking to demand the VA start having performance metrics that measures their clinical treatment programs. Right now, the VA has no performance metrics, none. You know, how can you measure if your programs are working if you don't measure the success of them? Right now, I'll give you another stat that's really alarming. Out of the 22 suicides per day, only 6 people utilize the VA. So that tells me 2 things. First thing is lack of access. The 650,000 can't get access to the VA. And that goes out to you, Mr. Wilkie. You are failing your job of trying to get these folks access to care. And you're doing it purposely. We can talk about that later on. There's a transition period too, Don. I know you were when you were on active duty, and I'm on active duty, or if anybody's in the Guard or Reserve. There's a time when you have to leave, right? I mean, you got to get out. I did it after 31 years, but a lot of folks do it after 2 or 3 years. And if they got a mental injury, a moral injury, mental injury, there's a transition period. So we're actually starting to work that right now. In some circles, to get these folks mental health care prior to them leaving their services. And we're working with other nonprofits on that right now.
Well, you know, I just wanted to say that when I originally came back from Nam, when I got out of the hospital, I was in military hospitals for just under 6 months. And I had been actually wounded very severely. And I got home, and I'll tell you what, all I wanted to do, now incidentally, my dad, had retired from the Army in 1968. He was a senior chief warrant officer when he got out. All right. And when I got back, all I wanted to do was take that uniform off, burn it, and forget about it. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I did not want to have jack all to do with the military or anything else. Now, my mother grabbed me by the ear and she said, "You're going over to the Veterans Administration and you're going to sign up over there." And I fought her on it, but she persevered. And the other thing that she did, okay, was get me in touch with the DAV service officer. Now, my grandfather, who was a World War I and a World War II veteran, was one of the founding members of the DAV back in the 20s after the First World War. He had almost died in service near the end of the war. I'm not sure exactly what had happened to him, but all I know is he was in the hospital for a long time, and he was buddies with a guy by the name of James Van Zandt. Now, Jimmy Van Zandt and he had been pals forever, okay? And Van Zandt ended up being our long-serving, long-time congressman from our area, all right? And so, I mean, it was all very comfy. And between them, those two guys, and of course many others that had served in the First World War, got the DAV going. So this guy comes over to our home. I met him. He had been, incidentally, a Korean War veteran. Then he served in Vietnam. He got shot up by a sniper and should have died, I guess, but he had been shot. This VC had an M1 Garand rifle. You know what that is, 30 caliber, very, very powerful weapon. And he took 3 or 4 hits from that M1, and he lost bone in his legs. He had to wear braces. I mean, this poor guy was a mess, but he was a proud DAV service officer. So I joined. I ended up being taking out a life membership. And it's a good damn thing I did. Now, my point is, these veteran service organizations I've talked to, I couldn't tell you how many veterans that they should do 2 things after they're out, even if they don't want to. Number 1, get signed up at the Veterans Administration. Good, bad, or indifferent. You should do that for your own sake. Number 2, join a service organization, which leads me to this question. And I'm just looking at my clock, Mike, and we're at the top of the hour, so stand by. I'm going to ask you that question when we come back. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight on the 19th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, my very special guest, Colonel Michael Brown, retired from the United States Army. We've been talking about a hell of a lot of things involving men and women, military veterans, and we're going to talk about a hell of a lot more when we come back. So stick around.
Hello, this is Commander Cobra of Task Force Griffin, KJR Radio, KJRradio.com. And I need you to be a member like myself of the People's Mosquito and help rebuild and fly this great aircraft. I have 3 friends here today also who are going to ask you the same thing. Consider becoming a member of the People's Mosquito.
Hello, I'm John Lilly. I'm the Managing Director of the People's Mosquito, and I'd like you to donate or support our flying program.
Hi, I'm Ross Sharp. I'm the Director of Engineering of the People's Mosquito, and I'd like you to help us rebuild this magnificent aircraft.
Hi, I'm Bill Ramsey. I'm the Operations Director and Team Pilot of the People's Mosquito. I need you to join us and become my wingman.
Join all of us and be a supporter of the People's Mosquito program. Thanks.
For the thousands of wounded warriors returning from battle, Wounded Warrior Project has developed the Warriors to Work program. a career counseling service that helps wounded warriors translate their military experience to a civilian job. These extraordinary men and women bring more than just teamwork and inspiration to the workplace. They bring proven world-class job skills. And to ensure proper placement, Wounded Warrior Project works with employers to find just the right job fit. Talented, skilled, and eager to get back to work, you have the opportunity to hire a seasoned veteran. Contact Wounded Warrior Project at findwwp.org. Welcome home the brave.
Every day, the men and women of the United States Marine Corps stand ready to defend the American way of life. The few, the proud, the Marines.
Every 2 seconds, someone needs blood. Whether it's a natural disaster or one single child suffering from illness, the American Red Cross stands ready to supply blood when it's most needed. But blood is a perishable product. Therefore, it must continuously be replenished. You can safely donate blood every 56 days. The need is constant and patients are waiting. Call your American Red Cross at 1-800-GIVE-LIFE to schedule your life-saving appointment. Please give blood today. Patients are depending on you.
Now you have the inside contact for Alternative Talk Radio. The Planet. KGRARadio.com.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for hour number 2 with my very special guest, Colonel Michael Brown, retired U.S. Army, which, by the way, was my branch of the service. Mike, right before we went to break, we were really rolling along well until I happened to look at the clock, and I told you I have actually now I've got several questions that have been coming in from the KGRA chat lounge. This question comes from our producer, Bill Skywatcher, and basically it goes like this. How long does the average veteran need to wait, Mike, for a medical claim and the red tape to be seen by a doctor and perhaps even covered by their insurance at the VA? What's the average wait time? Let's say I'm brand new. I just got out of the service. I've got a problem from something that happened to me during my military service. I'm trying to get into the VA. What's the deal? Are they going to string me along, twirl me around? What?
So a great question. I can tell you, we had a guest on our last show, and it took him 27 years. Now, that's not the norm. So the norm right now, and this is their running average, is between 125 days that's the shortest, and 700 days. That's what they're averaging. And then don't ask me why it's a broad range, but that's what they're looking at right now. So anywhere from 4 months to 2 years, and that's if you even get in. They have a backlog. I was telling you before, some folks have waited 4 years, some are 6, some are 10. They're sporadic. This is why it's very important, and let me talk to the veterans and you, and I can explain why this is so important while you're on service. You need to take at least 18 months prior to coming off duty. You need to have all your paperwork squared away before you get out of the Army, Air Force, any of the military services. What does that mean, Mike? Well, what that means is you need to go to your doctor, wherever your doctor is, for the military, armed forces, wherever you're at, your clinic, and get all your I's and T's crossed. And what that means specifically, you need to have all the codes for all your injuries already completed. Do not let the VA be the one, when you get out, to code you. When I say code, what does that mean? Well, if you have a heart condition like I have high blood pressure, there's a code that goes with that. You make the active duty folks put that in there. If you have a broken leg or an airborne injury like I did with my knees, there's a code for that, wherever that may be. Broken arm. There's lots of injuries you've sustained after being in war for 19 years, 3 deployments, 6 deployments, whatever you've been on. All that needs coded in your military medical record. Let me tell you another story, Don. True story. And there's an act going in front of legislation right now we all need to support. It's called the Brandon Act. This is for our mental health folks. You need to pay attention to this one right now. It's been passed by the Senate already. That means it's going to the president for signature here soon. Brandon was a Navy sailor. Brandon was bullied at work by his supervisors. He had PTSD from his tours in combat. And he was trying to get help when he got back. But he kept on getting bullied and he wouldn't be offered mental health services at all. He finally had enough. And in front of his peers, he threw himself into a rotor wing helicopter and killed himself. His parents took action. And so did the Congress people. And they wrote that Brandon Act up. And so now the Brandon Act will allow every service member who has a mental health condition to go and look at their commander and says, I'm following the Brandon Act, and you can walk right over to mental health, and you don't have to say anything to your commander. No longer do commanders have authority over mental health professionals. See, before, in Brandon's case, the commander had authority over Brandon and wouldn't let him have help. No longer.
Well, you know,
you have mental health issues.
In Vietnam,
you go get help.
In Vietnam, he wasn't my supervisor. At the time, I was a Speedy 4, okay? And this guy was a staff sergeant. And he kind of had an infamous reputation of, he was not my direct supervisor, okay? But he was in the unit. For getting liquored up and turning into a genuine first-class a-hole, all right? Well, he pulled that with me once, and I kind of slid out of his way. But the second time, I said, nah, it ain't going to work. Now, I was pretty big, 6'2". I was pretty hard, like a walnut. And I had already had my hair parted by bullets flying by. So I told this guy to back off. Now, this was off duty, okay? I was headed back up north. So I figured I had a little leeway. And I tackled this guy, got him down, put him in a headlock, and then I pulled my Gerber knife and I stuck it to his throat. And I said, are we done? And he didn't say anything, so I nicked him just a little bit. And I said, now I'm going to ask you one more time, are we done? Yeah, we're done. And that was the last time I had any problem with that guy, Mike. Now, was that politic? No, it was not. And actually, under different circumstances, they might have locked me up. But you know what? The guy backed off because he knew I was dead serious. Now, I'm not asking for a yay or a nay on there. I'm just telling you a story.
No, there's so much stigmatism in today's forces, unfortunately, still. And that's why there's so many, unfortunately, Don, that won't come forward.
Well, here's another question from one of our esteemed KGRA chat lounge users, Blue Orb. And we had mentioned earlier, talking about the VA and malpractice suits. And he wants to know, how do these malpractice claims compare to civilian practitioners?
So here's how the process works. A lot different than the civilian practitioners. First of all, you can't sue the VA. You sue the United States government. Second, there's a 2-year statutory limit on the way you sue them. That means you can only sue them from the time, and this is important, that's why I have to explain it. There's 2 years to sue in the federal court, so it's a federal court, from the time of the injury or time of the claim. The VA itself has 6 months to respond. They can sit on it or not. Then you have 6 months from that to go to court, and they have 6 months to give you records. So you can see how fast those 2 years expire. Second, what the VA is doing now is hiring private contractors as doctors. Guess what? Can't sue a private contractor. So it's kind of hard to compare. I bet you it's lower. Why was it lower? For that very reason. Second, I believe it's a lower amount because it's capped by the state that you're in. So I could be sued in California, in your state, Don, for your cap is $250,000. My cap over here, or cap where Bill's at in New York, is unlimited, for example. So don't have the specific fact on it. My opinion would be it's probably lower because you can't sue the federal contracted doctors that are in there, and the VA is aiming more doctors to be federal contractors.
Well,
for the very reason that go ahead.
Yeah, Blue Orb had an addendum to this. In my own friends and family circle, I have seen and spoken to veterans who refuse to go or go back to the VA. Do you have any idea why that would be?
Can you repeat that question one more time?
Sure.
Misunderstood it.
Sure. In my own friends and family circle, I have seen and spoken to veterans who either outright refuse to go to the VA or to go back to the VA. Do you have any idea why this would be?
Yeah, the VA has lower quality of care than they have on the outside. That's known. They, especially for specialty treatment. Now, I get my standard VA care for my prescriptions, maybe like you do, because I don't have to pay a copay. I get those at the VA. But all my specialty care, I don't get that at the VA. I use my TRICARE service and my own insurance. There has been so many malpractice suits, and I didn't realize this until the last 3 months after investigating it, how much malpractice for simple malpractices. You know.
Well, I got a question. I got a question for you, right directly on my VA.
And actually, real quick, and then the length of time to get into an appointment. You know, there's been times there where it could be a year before you can get a specialty appointment. So, you know, it's just not accessible. That's the big problem at the VA. Things are not accessible.
On my VA patient's card, Mike, it clearly specifies Purple Heart recipient or Purple Heart veteran.
Yep.
And according to the VA, we Purple Heart recipients are to get priority care.
You're priority 2, right?
I'm sorry?
You're priority 1 because you're 100%. But if you're Purple Heart without 100, yeah, you're a high priority if you're a Purple Heart. I'm not sure what. I think it's a priority 2 if you don't have 100%. But yes, you're a priority. Yep, definitely.
So, do they, in your opinion, do they honor that pretty much?
So here's my understanding of so there's 8 priorities. Can you get this? There's 8 priorities in the VA for healthcare. They can barely get through priority 1. They only can get right now, and they're complaining that their full capacity at 27.6%. Do you really think they're going to get care at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th priority? if they're only doing 27.6% capacity and they're saying they're 100% manned right now and they can only handle that? No. I don't think so.
What the hell do we do?
Doesn't make sense. Stand in line and wait. It goes back to, where do you stand in position with the VA? Do you or do you not believe that the VA should start handing care over to the private sector?
I do.
President Trump, yes, and President Trump believes so too, through the Choice Program. That's why the Choice Program came out. The Choice Program, the Choice Act came out to say, if you cannot see your patients within 30 days, then you must put them on the commercial side for treatment, and you must pay for it. And that rubs the VA the wrong way, because they think they're now out of a job and they're going to be privatized. And you know what? So what? You should be privatized. My opinion, you're not cutting the mustard. Your mental health is not pushing anything. You're not moving the needle there. You're not moving the needle. And basically on this COVID-19, you stop reporting the deaths in your hospitals. You've crushed lives over this COVID-19 in your hospitals too. So I believe it's time for the VA to get out of the healthcare business, stay in the claims and benefits business, and start moving healthcare over to the private side and integrate this into a healthcare for all. And that's one of the things we're advocating for. And what we're going to call that, as soon as we get our ducks in order and we start getting our foundation on our feet, we're going to call that the Lincoln Act. There you go. We just announced that here on your show today.
We had another question come in from another one of our KGRA chat lounge users, John Ostains. John says, what's the source that your guest has given for the 4-month to a 4-year average wait time for the VA patients, Mike?
That was a GAO report.
Oh,
Government
really?
Accounting Office.
GAO.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Interesting. Very interesting. Now, for everybody out there that may not know what the GAO is, do you want to educate them a little bit?
GAO report basically is a government accounting office, and it looks at the performance of all the federal agencies. Could be looking at the Department of Defense.
And they are supposedly, they're not affiliated with anybody. They're supposedly independent.
Yeah, objective. And they provide recommendations. They're not a legislative arm or anything like that, but they do report out to Congress.
I interviewed a congressman about roughly 20-odd years ago about the world infamous Roswell case. He was a congressman from Roswell, New Mexico. And at that time, the United States Air Force was in the process of releasing their quote-unquote final report on the Roswell incident. Roswell case closed. Now, this guy basically was given, now he's a U.S. congressman, right? So, I mean, he's no lightweight, was given the runaround by the Air Force. At any rate, he ended up going to the GAO requesting an investigation on this, their reticence to come clean, the stuff that they were obviously hiding and concealing. And guess what the GAO found, Mike?
What did they find?
They found that the Air Force, and at that time it was still the Army Air Force, this was before the United States Air Force became a separate entity. They found that 3 years of communications at that facility for that time frame suddenly and mysteriously disappeared, which, according to law, was totally illegal. And what do you think came out of that?
Nothing.
Nothing. Not a bloody thing. So, yeah, your government dollars at work, my friend.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of defense contracting at very high levels, and with jet planes and naval ships, and GAO come in. Boy, they could rake you over the coals, man. Supposed to be very informative, though.
Yes.
You know,
well, when were you deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan?
Between 2000, so I had multiple tours over there. I was the 2009 through 2012. So
in Iraq or Afghanistan or both?
Both. Yeah. So I was over there for a long period of time.
Things were pretty hot then, weren't they?
Yeah, they were pretty hopping. Pretty hopping. A lot of insurgency fighting at that time. A lot of issues going on with non-combatants getting killed.
Were you infantry there, Mike?
No, at that time I was acquisition side of the house. I was working Hellfire missiles and working with the aviation community, UAVs and Apaches.
Oh, I bet you and Commander Cobra had a lot to chat about.
Yeah. I told him. I said we stomped the same grounds together. I actually looked at his resume. I said, no, I was there. That was pretty interesting. Yeah. So yeah, we had a lot to do about. We worked really fielded the first Army combat arms reconnaissance. Armed the first UAV for the Army, believe it or not. And the Air Force had them for a while, but I was part of the team that we first armed our UAVs together. So that was pretty touch moment. No longer had to rely on the Air Force to do the Army's UAV work anymore.
Now I was
killed a lot of bad guys.
I was never officially a military sniper, but I was a SWAT team sniper. Okay.
Oh, nice.
So I got a question for you, and this comes from a number of years ago. I heard and this would have been during the Obama administration, that things were so locked down then that snipers positioned forward, if they would see an individual carrying a weapon in a hot zone, that they would literally have to radio back to get permission to take them under fire, or they could go to prison. Is that true?
I don't know about the prison part, but the rules of engagement were really, really insane. And I believe, I can say it now too, that Obama and his rules of engagement that the administration placed on us were very dangerous, to the fact that he got, you talked in the beginning of the show with Benghazi. That same type of security was lacking in Operation New Dawn over in Iraq. I saw it when I was over there, the lack of security. I was part of the security team transitioning services from the Army over to the Department of State. I saw that lack of security up there. I heard and talked to incredible folks over there in Iraq and Afghanistan about those kind of rules of engagement you're discussing right now, and they still kind of have to act to God to do anything over there.
Now when you
tie the general's hands like that, and you tie, I think he left 151 people left in Iraq and pulled everybody out by December. I think it was December 11th of 2011 in Iraq, and then started pulling equipment from even Afghanistan in a sense. You're just doing the wrong thing, and it showed.
If you had to explain this to someone, and you had to give them your opinion on why Obama and his administration acted like that, I don't know. I wasn't there. I did not serve during that period of time, but just by what I know and the people that I have spoken with, I would I be out of line to suggest that he and his administration had a strong affinity with the Islamic militants?
I would say they were naive in the Middle East, lacked foreign policy, and that it had to be that, because they had to see the Middle East was on fire at that point. They sure weren't advised by the generals that were in charge over there to exit Iraq, knowing Syria was on fire, knowing the northern borders in Tikrit and Mosul, with the ISIS and the Caliphate ongoing that was up there, was going to run them over within months, which they did. They had to know that was going to take place. If they said they did not know, or they were malice in their thought, I can only believe this, that they were incompetent in their foreign policies and lacked moral courage to do the right thing. I mean, I don't know what else to tell them.
Well, it seemed like a lot of the senior Pentagon staff, if they disagreed with his policies at that time, they were rifted out.
Yeah, he blamed it on, so he blamed it on the SOFA status, right? Status of Forces Agreement, that we couldn't do a status of forces agreement, therefore we're coming out, right? What a crock of shit. We do status of forces agreement with every place we go. That's not a way to say we're, just because we don't have a status of forces agreement, that we're leaving. We came back, didn't we? That wasn't the reason we left. We left because
how many innocent civilians ended up getting killed by ISIS? You don't even hear about ISIS now.
You gotta believe tens of thousands, 20, 30, 40, maybe 50, maybe 100. That whole town up in the northern borders, those towns that I know, I was up in there, Mosul, Tikrit, Kirkuk, Erbil. They were slaughtered, and they even started coming down south from there. I mean, they were butchered. The Kurds had to come down and help out. And, they were getting fired up on too. So who knows how many were actually executed and murdered.
These were the worst of the worst, weren't they?
They were. They butchered them. They took them to pictures I saw, some of the stuff I saw coming out of there. I have a friend who's a general up in Kurdistan, sent me some stuff down. They were executing them off the side of the piers, just one by one, just chopping their heads off right there off the pier. Just bring them down like a slaughterhouse, like a bunch of cows.
All right, I got a question. I got another question for you, Mike. Now, in Vietnam, we had, among our arsenal of munitions that we could use, and it was very effective, was napalm. Okay? Now, it's my understanding that napalm has since been discontinued as it's illegal. It's inhumane. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, too.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm somewhat of a pragmatist, all right? Now, would you please tell me what in the hell is the difference between putting a 7.62 from 600 yards through somebody's ear to dropping a canister of napalm on them? They're not any deader, and it could be saving American and Allied lives. What is the deal? Why were our hands tied in utilizing every resource that we could use in order to win this conflict? And if that sounds, ladies and gentlemen, a little barbaric, all I can tell you is you've never been on the wrong end of a bullet. Mike, what do you think?
I guess they didn't like the sticky jelly, man. I don't know, man. I don't know. It's like why do they use a hellfire on an individual, versus 7.62? I don't know. I think we should have. God, you're talking perfect language. Why did we not use a very strict, General Patton approach, best offense approach, offense, and take them out with force. We sit here and messed around with them, and a lot of people got killed because of it.
Timid. There are too many people in charge that are timid.
Yep, is exactly what I was going to say.
And it's this political correctness culture.
Yes,
that we have.
Until you let the generals run the battlefields, as long as you have, Congress and powers in the White House run the battlefields, you're always going to have a long, protracted war, and that's what you're seeing today.
Well, it's true that those who do not study and learn their history are doomed to failure. Now, I was a history major in college. Originally, I had intended to be a history instructor. I love history. I've loved it my entire life, and military history especially. Now, I've done some real in-depth historical study on the German Reich during World War II.
Right.
And it's amazing if that maniac Hitler would have stepped aside and let his military general staff run the war, it might have been a whole different ball of wax. Thank God he didn't, by the way. But those German generals were pretty sharp.
Oh, I agree.
But he really ended up screwing the pooch, which was good for us. But yeah. Now, when you were over there, now you hear a lot of people mentioning the Kurds. Now, everybody, if they paid any attention at all, know the Kurds and the Turks do not get along. But how were the Kurds considered our allies in that?
Oh yes, Kurds, the Peshmerga forces, they faced death just like we did. They fought autonomously in the region. Actually, the Kurds really are a part of Iraq. If you believe it or not, they are actually a part of that. They're not a separate country. But however, they fought right with us. They were the ones that were genocide, if you remember right, from the Iraqis. But they fought right along with us. Yeah, the Peshmerga forces are some badass people, man. They are some ruffians. Yeah, so they fought right along with us and still fight along with us today. They went into Syria with us. Yeah.
Well, how much now, of course, you as an American soldier and you and your troops over there, you had to deal with, and I'm talking primarily Iraq now, you had to deal with the indigenous people there all the time. Now, I don't know how many people are aware that Islam is divided into two sects. You have the Sunni sect and you have the Shia. Now, basically what it is, it's a difference in ideology between these two sects, but they really hate each other, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
How did that thing, now I sound like Joe Biden, the thing of the thing. How did that ideology conflict play out with the Americans there?
I don't know if we saw it that much. I mean, we politics for us was aside. I think from our standpoint, we had this is the way, and General Casey kind of set that standard up for us. This is what we had to do to make things work, because it got really nasty in 2005 and 2006. After the war and after the freedom that we set free after Saddam Hussein, we had a big problem. The Shiites right, and the Sunnis. Who was in charge? Someone had to take charge. We disbanded their whole army, so now we didn't have any security. But we had to be the security. And then we had to get the Sunni Shia. We couldn't deal with that. That was a cultural on its own. We had to let that take care of itself. So the way we kind of took care of it was we had to make sure we had security going. We had to make sure we had educational systems going. We had to make sure the hospitals going. We had to make sure all the infrastructure was going. And then we had to work amongst the Shiites and Sunnis that were in place and tribal to make that going and so forth. So our foreign affairs officers were busy. We had interpreters out there that were busy to keep the peace and keep things circulated. So that's kind of how we handled it. And then we kept the security going ourselves.
Well, here's something else. Iran has been hostile to us since the Ayatollah Khomeini took over in 1979. Okay.
Yeah.
And there have been a lot of behind the scenes shenanigans with the Iranians. They were making very, very sophisticated devices that they were sending into Afghanistan to kill and maim American troops. And they had a very strong presence with the Shia in Iraq. And as a matter of fact, a lot of people think that it was the Iranians that were really pulling the strings with the Shia populace in Iraq. Now, did you encounter any of that, Mike?
I didn't myself. I didn't. I know they had the Katyusha rocket thing going on over there, and harassed years later we found out about it, but I personally couldn't answer that, Don.
No, I thought maybe you might have heard some scuttlebutt or, something along those lines about what they were doing. Well, now, when you were in Afghanistan, now, was that a whole different horse in Afghanistan than as compared to Iraq? Afghanistan was even more primitive, was it not?
Yeah, Afghanistan worried me as a person. And I tell you why it worried me as a person. Not only was it poor and desolate, but just, and I'll tell you a story. I remember in Bagram, where I was at. I was in Bagram at the time.
What part of the country is that?
Bagram, that's on the southeast side of the country. About southeast of, next to the Helmand province. I believe that's where it's at. But anyways, it was, that's where all the Air Force operations at, where the UAVs are at. And anyways, I was running around the track there one day, and I saw these kids coming through a minefield. And I just couldn't fathom. I have little kids. I had little kids. Seen little kids. 3 and 4-year-olds navigating with their little lunch pails, coming out of their little their mud huts, traveling through this minefield each day to go to school. Even knowing the night before there was a bomb that went off and blew up. They also had the prison there at Bagram. And how rough of a life that really is. And the lack of care. There's no parents with them. And how easy would it have been if they would have nudged each one of them off to the left or right, even a foot or two, and they would have blew up in one of those mines.
Who deployed the minefield?
The Afghanis.
Afghan National Force or the insurgents?
Yeah. Afghan National Forces, left over from the wars.
Russia wars?
Russian wars, yeah.
So they never went in and deactivated those, huh?
Never deactivated them. No. And then in the same pathway, though, you'd go around the corner. I mean, you're just talking a little pathway. And that night before, the day before that, they had a bazaar going on the outside. They blew themselves up right in front of the bazaar, killing a couple people right in front of the bazaar. Americans too. Helicopters taking off at night, going out on missions, coming back, Black Hawks coming back with injured, going to the medical hospital. Just the type of operation, small insurgency tactics going out. And I never got out to the small combat posts. That wouldn't have been stuff I would be doing. That's small unit tactics, infantry guys. But just talk to these guys out there, just the rough style they live. They'd go days, weeks, months without any combat support. Whatever they had to stay with. And I remember them, I was trying to get them types of equipment out there. Just to wash their clothes would be a privilege. And I remember coming back, and there's this place in Kuwait, kind of like a staging area before you go to Iraq or Afghanistan. All of us pass through it. And it's almost like a little cage you kind of sit in. You're waiting for your aircraft. And I could see these folks coming out of Afghanistan, sitting in there as we're passing through. We're all seeing and looking at each other. These men that are coming out, they're not more than 25 years old, but they look like they're in their 30s. They look like they're just souls that have just been stripped from them. That's how ghostly they look when they come out. It's horrible. They've been through some shit.
I just watched a film a week or so ago titled The Outpost. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah. That unit that was way out there?
Yes. Have you viewed it?
Yeah.
Yeah, based on a very true story where small team with a few Afghan nationals ended up battling hundreds and hundreds of Taliban fighters. Now, is that more the norm, or was that something a little...
That was a little out there, that outside the norm. I think that if I remember that sequence right, they got ambushed. If I remember right.
The whole damn base, Mike, was in a valley. I mean, where the mountains surrounded the outpost. The Taliban were in the mountains. I'll tell you exactly what I thought of. Dien Bien Phu. Whatever general authorized that needed his ass kicked up between his shoulders, because he's probably about as ignorant of strategy and tactics as he was of fornicating.
Yeah, because they were fired down on from the top of that mountain, if I remember right.
Right.
And everybody was just getting their ass kicked on the American side, man. They were just getting all shot up. If I remember that right. But I would say that's a norm maybe at the scale of that one was. I think it was not the norm. Here's the kind of message I got when I was back home. It was probably in 2010. And these outposts, they couldn't defend them. All they had was small arms fire. They couldn't get it, just because of the way they were positioned, they couldn't really get any precision type of munitions out there other than mortars, but mortars weren't doing it. They needed something bigger. And we were getting called back home to design, kind of out-of-the-box thinking weapon systems that we could deploy in there. And there was one incident where I think there was a squad, or maybe been a team of 12 or whatever. 9 of them got killed because they had no way to defend themselves. They were in these corridors and these little pockets where the high ground was always at their disadvantage. Somebody else was always occupying these high grounds over there. That's kind of the way the territory was. They couldn't get Apaches, they couldn't get UAVs out to them. They couldn't get any air support. And that's what was killing them.
Not even fast movers.
No, they couldn't get them out there. Out there is in the far western side of Afghanistan. No, they couldn't get out there. They couldn't get high prime vehicles out there either. Yeah, it was really hard. They left these guys out there just with muddy boots, man, and small arms fire. So I believe what happened after that incident was a lot of they called them COPs, combat outpost. versus tactical outposts. I heard they closed most of them down because they just weren't supportable, which is sad. But
well, once again, you were correct in saying the only way that something as chaotic as that, you'd have to be the aggressor force on the move all the damn time. Static defenses didn't work in Vietnam, didn't work well in Korea. Ask the Marines. I mean, my God, the Marines, you know, in Way City when they were fighting that fight, I mean, everybody was basically locked in place. The rules of engagement were so crazy. Initially, they couldn't bring in jet aircraft. They couldn't drop 500-pounders on them. They were afraid of damaging the buildings. And what happened to the Marines? My God, they got slaughtered there.
Yep.
Nobody's learned their lesson, have they?
No, that's why I was so blessed to be part of the Hellfire, UAV and Apache mission, man. At least we had the means and the technology, and when we got the calls, we could fight them, man. It was just a good part of it. I mean, it was one of my solace moments, being a team that could actually go out and fucking hit shit, man, and know that they were going to be dead when we were done, man.
Well, now what is the deal with the Hellfire? I mean, a lot of people have probably heard the term. What exactly is it? What does it do?
Yeah, so a Hellfire is what you would call one of the precision missiles, only precision missile that could be used on a UAV and a rotary wing helicopter. And basically, at the end of the day, you fire that thing off, and it'll unclassified. It'll go about 10 miles, and you'll hit something as small as a teacup saucer. And
they were originally designed to take out armor, weren't they?
Yeah, they were a tank buster, and we got the call when I was in command to change that up to be a people buster, and to isolate and destroy targets on call, on the move, delay explosions, you name it, man. And different angles before you can fire.
Let me get just a little more personal. Talking about personal weapons. Now, in Vietnam, when the M14 rifle was replaced with the M16s, originally, the M16s were an unproven concept, at least the way they were issued. They did not have a chrome bore yet. They would jam. The ammunition that they were using, they had used extruded powder originally made for the M14, which was a big rifle. It jammed up the very tight tolerances of the M16. Guys were killed. Now, eventually, granted, they got those problems ironed out, but had a lot of dead GIs in the meantime. Now, in Afghanistan and Iraq, you're talking about very long distances often. And what was the general consensus of the rifles the guys were using who were on the tip of the spear? The M4s and what have you. Were they happy with them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think what happened out of this war and this generation, our defense industry really came together quickly, effectively. Listen to the warfighters this time. The warfighters designed the weapons that they used. And I'm not kidding you either. They talked to the manufacturers. They talked to the weapons builders, and they basically built their weapons themselves, with the designs and the requirements.
You know
that
what
all
I
got
used?
done.
You know what I used near the end? I got my hands on an M3 grease gun.
Did you really?
That was a real ass kicker up close and personal. And when we got overrun, well, that gave pretty good service, if you know what I mean. Now,
yeah, I bet you it did, man.
Yeah, big 45, big fat 45 slow slug. Yeah,
that'll push you down a little bit. Make you taste a little dirt.
Yeah, that got the job done. And I was kidding. I was talking to Commander Cobra one time, and I was kind of curious, and I've had a lot of experience with small arms, and I said, what were you carrying as a personal defense weapon over there? And I don't remember. I think he said a 9mm. And I said, oh, buddy, there's nothing like that in 1911. And they got newer designs now, but the same bullet. And that can't be beat. And I was kind of kidding him about that. But
we're doing 6 Sawyers, and I carried a Beretta.
92F?
Yeah.
Well, you had 15 rounds in that thing, but you needed 15 rounds.
Yeah, there's times where I would rather have a grease gun like you, buddy. There's places I didn't want to be where I was at.
Yeah, well,
some of those places
I got that off in Arvin, and yeah, it was. I'd like to have brought it home, but then I'd have gotten in trouble. So.
Yeah, they're getting ready to issue a 6.8mm rifle here pretty soon, man. So.
We are, believe it or not, Mike, almost out of time. Now, you got a show coming up on Sunday. What do you got? What do you got in the oven for that?
I got Commander Cobra coming on, Bubba. We got him going on, Don. He's going to tell us the rough world and what's going on in his life. We're going to talk about PTSD and moral injury. We're going to talk about war. We're going to talk about how are we going to prevent this suicide epidemic that's plaguing America, and what's going on in Congress. And
so it'll be you and co-host Sean Flynn that'll be doing this,
and our special advisor Rick Brown. Yeah,
and Rick Brown,
Columbus, Ohio. Yeah, he's not my brother. He's my fraternity brother. We were frat brothers in college. So, yep, that's what's going on. And we got a couple shows that are going on too. There was a murder in the VA recently. It's a George Floyd VA version. A guy threw a styrofoam cup on the floor and got tackled by one of the security guards who put his knee in the back of his neck. And he choked him out. His diaphragm collapsed on him. You wonder where the movement there is, right?
Is this a VA federal police officer or a security guard?
No. It was he was in a mental health facility for mentally ill and for PTSD, and he knocked somebody's styrofoam cup out, and the security guy that was in there tackled him. He was 37 years old. They got it on camera. We got it on camera. It's all video. That's kind of stuff you're going to get on Crisis in America, PTSD, and veteran suicide. We get the lowdowns, man. Yep, sure do. And his name was Luke Smythe, 37 years old, died for knocking a styrofoam cup out. Where's the media attention there? That just happened too, by the way.
Where was this at?
So Luke Smythe was at Virginia. He was in the Virginia building down in Virginia. Yep.
Well, Mike, my friend, we are out of time. This has been an absolutely fascinating show, 2 hours with you. I want to take this opportunity to invite you back. And I got to tell you, buddy, I have a lot of admiration for you.
Thank you. I have a lot of admiration for you. It's been a great show. PTSD is a very serious thing. I'm tired of losing our men and women, our sons and daughters. This suicide epidemic, it seems like it's being overshadowed by COVID-19. We can't let that happen, Don.
Well, a lot of things are being overshadowed by that, and I am beginning to question now how serious actually is this COVID virus. Mike, we got to go, buddy. Hey, best to you and your family. go with God. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be tuned in on Sunday.
All right. God bless you, Don. God bless America.
Amen, brother. Amen. That's it for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back with another brand new episode next Friday. In the meantime, keep your eyes pointed up, keep your ear to the ground, and we'll see you then. Good night.